Hi, Dan Goodstein here with the Digital Enterprise Institute. I'm joined by Tony Saldanha. Tony is the former VP of IT and Shared Services at Procter& Gamble and now leads his own advisory firm, Transform It. Tony, great to see you again.
Hey, Dan, always a pleasure.
So for those who haven't met you yet or heard you speak, just give us a little background on you and what you've been doing the last few years.
So I've been extremely fortunate to have grown up with the IT and shared services industry. I was with Procter & Gamble for 27 years, across the world, 6 different countries, and was associated with the evolution of the industry, setting up shared services centers in the early 1990s in the Philippines, and then, the outsourcing wave in the early 2000s, and then digital transformation more recently. So as of about 2015, at Procter & Gamble, where I was faced with a little bit of an ironic problem, which is having led IT and global business services, which at P&G is a very large organization. It's about $2 billion, and I had the privilege of leading that in every region of the world. The ironic problem was, what do you do if you're considered to be best in class? What do you do to essentially get to the next stage? And the answer ended up being, well, you really have to drive 10x change, 10 times change, which is what led me to the problem of digital transformation and change management. And as of a year ago, I've left P&G, and as you correctly said, I now run my own organization, Transform It.
Great. So, Tony, apparently, I don't need to tell you, apparently 70% of digital transformations fail. So why is that? And what's the solution?
Yes, it's a horrible statistic, isn't it? Especially in the context of digital transformation being a $1.7 trillion industry, but that's not it. That would be a really bad percentage of failure in any industry. It's also that it's a very critical industry in the 4th industrial revolution. So, but the reason why 70% of digital transformations fail comes down to 2 things. One is language, the other is execution methodology. Language, digital transformation is a very fuzzy term. The term digital is fuzzy because it conjures up memories from digital watches in the 70s all the way through, artificial intelligence and robots coming for our jobs today. Sure. And so the issue for most leaders who talk digital transformation is that they're not exactly clear on what they're aiming at. The second issue is that digital transformation execution is still done using IT project management methodology. And the problem with that is twofold. One, it is digital transformation is 90% organization change and 10% technology. And so, using the wrong methodology can lead to obvious issues. But then the second is digital transformation is also a high risk, high return type of an intervention, whereas IT project management tends to be, better suited for normal risk kind of efforts. And so you bring those two together, the issue of, terminology and execution methodology. And what you get is, a pretty bad percentage of failures.
Yeah. And you mentioned the IT driven piece. So is your advice for these projects not to be driven by IT?
My advice is first and foremost to make sure that digital transformation is a business strategy, not a technology strategy. So sponsorship and hands-on work needs to really start at the top from the board and the CEO. I think the actual leadership of the work can come from IT and the CIO. In fact, most CIOs are in a very good position to take on the mantle. But the problem arises when it ends up being driven as a technology strategy, being pushed up towards the CEO as opposed to a business strategy, which is being executed by IT.
Yeah. Makes sense. So like any good process, Tony, if you had to break digital transformation into stages, what are they and what are most leaders getting wrong?
So in my book, Why Digital Transformations Fail, I offer up a 5-stage model. Stage 1 is foundation. This is really typically what most people confuse with digital transformation, which is automation, going to the cloud, upgrading your SAP platform. In reality, you're building a foundation to change the business model of the company itself. So it's not real digital transformation, but it's an essential step. Stage 2 in any company is where you start to have siloed transformation. So you might have a function, maybe the CFO who says, hey, I can dramatically change the way I do accounts receivables by using artificial intelligence, and start to do that. But again, it's siloed. It's not across the enterprise. Stage 3 of digital transformation is what I call partially synchronized. So the company or the organization does decide to do a central strategy to drive this, but execution is only partially synchronized. This is the example of what went wrong with General Electric under Jeff Immelt, where there was a corporate strategy, but the execution really didn't achieve success. Which leads me to stage 4, which is actually when execution is fully synchronized and they do hit one-time digital transformation. They change the entire model of the company and they're very successful. But I actually recommend to go a stage further, which is stage 5, also called living DNA. Living DNA is when you achieve not just one-time transformation, but constant transformation becomes the DNA of the organization. This is Netflix for you. Over the last 20 years, they've disrupted themselves 4 times, from mail and DVDs to streaming media to original content to international models, all of this within 20 years. So you have to be the one that disrupts yourself, not the other company. So that's really, the stages of transformation. And I recommend to leaders to be crystal clear about what part of their business model and their products they want to change. And of course, their organization culture. And that can be mapped into the 5 stages.
So you mentioned disruption. It seems to me it's very difficult to do digital without disruption, right? But how do you set the right goals and disrupt effectively, if that makes any sense, without creating just chaos?
Yes. This gets to the point I was making about digital transformation being a high risk, high return kind of a play, right? Because what you're talking about here is not continuous improvement, right? Now, the way to approach this is to first and foremost put this in the context of industrial revolutions. We're in the midst of the 4th industrial revolution. And during industrial revolutions, incremental change doesn't help, right? If you were, a textile mill in England in the 1800s, if you didn't do things dramatically differently in terms of factories, that wouldn't help. So what you really have to do is, in addition to your strategies for continuous improvement, you have to have a leg of your strategy that's devoted to disruption. And just as in your personal wealth portfolio, you have a place for low risk, low return stocks and high risk, high return stocks, and you manage the effect as a portfolio. Companies need to manage high risk, high return disruption projects, as a small part of the portfolio. Don't make big bets, don't just pick one technology and say, I'm going to go all in, right? And so, all of the MBA strategies that we were taught around, do your day-to-day, execution well, and then have a separate leg for continuous improvement isn't actually good enough during times of industrial revolutions. You need a third leg of the strategy, which is, and in addition, have, small experiments and a portfolio of them on highly disruptive change.
Yep. So Tony, you alluded to this before, but in your book, you talk about this idea of perpetual digital transformation. So what do you mean, and how is this accomplished?
Perpetual digital transformation is actually the same concept I talked earlier on digital DNA of the organization. And to your point, just to kind of get deeper into it a little bit, the world as we know it, thanks to the digital era, is never going to be as slow as it is today, right? Which essentially means that even if you were to go disrupt your model, right? Even if you were Walmart trying to get into, a head-on winning competition with Amazon, we know that that's not the end. There's going to be the next version of that show up, just in a few years or a decade or two. And so companies that want to, last, they have to find ways of getting sustainable competitive advantage, which essentially means continuous disruption. And so the way to do that is to bake disruption into the DNA of the organization. It's the organization that needs to come out with the most disruptive ideas. That's what Netflix does extremely well. That's what the Googles and many of the Silicon Valley digitally native companies do extremely well. And that is the biggest challenge for companies that were very successful in the third industrial revolution, but need to change to survive the fourth.
Great, great. Well, Tony, thanks for being here. And Tony will be with us for the next part of our digital transformation interview series, where we'll be talking about user centricity. But for now, Tony, thanks for being here, and see you on the next one.
Hey, always a pleasure. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks. Bye-bye.